Hi, everyone. It's Colleen, the Preparedness Pro, and I've got a great show in store for you today. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to talk to Araksya Kennard. Araksya and I have been friends for a long time, but she has got a unique story to share with you that I think we could all benefit from. There are just little nuggets of lessons in everything that she shares of this incredible story. Araksya was caught up in the earthquake in Armenia that happened several years ago when she was only 12 years old, getting ready to go to school, as a matter of fact. No one else was home. And let's just go ahead and start, Araksya, with you telling what happened, what you were doing, and how big was the earthquake?
Um, they say it was like 6.7, but the scientists that I came to know later, they said that the Richter scale broke at 12 in their
Oh, my.
system, in their office. So um, it was 11:41 a.m. when the earthquake happened, and I was in our apartment, second floor, by myself, getting ready to go to school. And so the walls come down around me. When it started shaking, I wasn't sure what was happening because we were not prepared for it. And I thought that was from the neighbors upstairs because they were renovating their house and hammer, constantly loud noises. And I thought, now look what they have done. They brought down the house. That was my first thought. And I'm getting dressed at the same time, and the big, huge, old TV, so heavy you can hardly move, like a box. And it rolled down 3 times, and it stopped right in front of my feet. And
Wow.
it's a narrow room. You don't have much room to wiggle. And I had the wardrobe furniture behind me where we hung our clothes. And so I just continued getting dressed. And then I hear big banging on the door, calling my name. It was my uncle who came to rescue me. He worked 5 minutes away from us, my mom's brother, and I couldn't get to the door. I had to climb on ruins on walls that had come down, and the door was shut. I couldn't open because it was covered with rubbles.
So wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand this well. This 12-year-old mind of yours was thinking, okay, the walls have come down. The TV has rolled just in front of me. I barely missed death, but I'm going to go to school.
Oh yeah. When my uncle broke the door open to get me out, I'm carrying my backpack full of books. And he says, "Drop that. Come on out fast." And I said, "No, I'm not missing school." So I was an A student and I was not going to miss a school because the neighbor broke the house down. So that was my thought. And interesting enough, I did not even quite understand the scope of the damage that was done at that point until later. When we climbed back in, I noticed the wall had come down. I didn't even notice. I guess I was in a shock or something that I was walking over them.
So you get outside of your apartment. What did you see?
Well, I have to say it was December 7, so it's winter time, and I'm in my uniform, just dressed, no jacket, nothing. I didn't have time to get it out because my uncle just pulled me out. And outside, I see huge dust, big. I couldn't even figure out, I couldn't recognize the area. What had happened is across the street from us, very close, a few yards away, there was a headquarters of the U.S. Armenian Postal Service, and that huge building had come down completely.
Mm.
And so it was all dust everywhere. I really could not recognize anything. So we had to go outside and stand away from buildings.
So how did your uncle know to come and find you?
How did he come find me?
Yeah, how did he
Well, my
know from
mom
the
worked because my mom and my uncle worked together in the same place. It was a TV repair place. My mom was the CPA and he was the repairman. When my mom walks out of her office and sees this huge dust, she could see our building from her office. That's how close it was. But she couldn't see our building at that point. And she thought, oh, my child. And the apartment went down, she thought. And she collapsed on the ground, on the street. She couldn't move. And of course, the
Mm.
aftershakes and everything. So, and then my uncle sees her and she yells, go save her. And so my uncle left everything. He had his own family, but he came to rescue me first. I
Oh,
can never
wow, that's
forget that.
wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
So, what your initial response was some kind of denial, which is very interesting because a lot of people do hit that denial when a crisis comes upon them. That they, you're denying as a 12-year-old girl, this isn't a big deal. I'm going to school. You go outside and you see all this dust. So, when were you able to be reunited with the rest of your family members?
It did not take too long, thankfully, because my mom was that close. She said when she found some strength in her knees, she got up and walked across the street. And she came to me and she tells my uncle, go after your family, go check out on them. Because, well, at the time we did not have cell phones. Even if we had it, nothing was working.
Mm-hmm.
And so and walking, there are no transportations, we did not have cars. So he walks home to discover, thankfully, the family was safe. And then we stood there trying to figure out what we are going to do. And then couple blocks away was my sister's school, 13 years old. She was a year older. And across from her was my brother's preschool. So he was 5 at the time. And my sister runs out of the school. The teachers all got them out. And she luckily didn't come down. And she noticed that the preschool building was all down except for one bedroom where all the kids were napping at the time.
Oh
If
my.
they were not napping, the teachers died. But the kids were safe.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
Um, and so she climbs, and there were no other walls. There was just a couple columns holding that room up where the kids were. It was like divine intervention. So my sister climbs on
Absolutely.
the ruins and everything and grabs my brother out of the bed. And he was in his underwear in winter, bare feet, came to
Oh
get
my.
reunited with us. When they came, they found us in the street waiting for them.
So fast forward a little bit, just a little bit. Your family reunites. What do you do in that
Mm-hmm.
immediate aftermath? How do you decide, okay, my little brother needs clothing. We we have some valuables in the house. What's your immediate response in that aftermath?
Um, we found a bench outside. We were sitting there, and my mom, of course, we are freezing. So my mom says, you stay here, I'll be back. She runs into the building, which was very dangerous because we were getting dozens of aftershocks even every few minutes. So she went, climbed into the apartment and got blankets and brought some food from home and our coats. And and that's how we actually sat on that bench for a few hours until my dad came from his work because he was working on the other end of the town and he had to walk until
That
he
had to
came.
be
And then,
that had to be
sorry,
heartbreaking.
Kelly.
That had to be heartbreaking for
Oh,
your dad, not knowing that whole walk on the way home what he would find.
oh, yeah, especially when he could see all the devastation. And the area where he was working, most of the buildings were down.
Mm.
So he was scared to death.
Yeah, absolutely. What a blessing that your whole family was intact and that your
Yes.
mom was able to safely get back in the building and get some essentials. So you have some
Okay.
essentials for the immediate aftermath. You've got blankets, you've
Mhm.
got some clothing, and you've got some food. But now what?
Now we did not have a place to stay the night. And then my aunt, my dad's sister, and their family had a garage, which is just one car with a big hole where you park the car to fix underneath. So it's not a regular garage like here, it's detached. And so we decided just to, that was the safest place to be because it was all metal. So we went the night there, and we had the extended family gather up there. So we had a bunch of people in this tiny, tiny square place. And the worst memory for me when I think of that is that my cousin, who was the same age as me and my closest one friend that I love dearly, she died at school that day. So her body was sitting next to us, laying next to us as we spent the night just sitting on the cement floor and
Mm,
watching that body.
wow.
I don't even remember anybody talking. Everybody was just in shock. So we
Wow.
spent the night in that garage.
What did you
Dark, no
do?
windows.
What did you do to move forward? You had to create a new normal in this aftermath. I don't want to give away a spoiler alert, but the fact of the matter was you went without water and electricity for 13 years after this,
Yeah,
correct?
um, that's true. But before that, for the next 6 months, the next morning, actually, we had family coming from the capital city, Yerevan. They did not get affected. Um, so they came and took us, the kids, to live with them. So here's my family. We're so close. I could never leave my mom's side. I was just attached to her, and it was so painful. My sister and I had to leave, and my brother, because he was so much younger, stayed with my mom. For 6 months, we stayed in Yerevan with this family, and it was hard. I have to say,
Mm,
I would have rather stayed in a tent, which lots of people did in the middle of the winter in a tent, living anywhere they could. And so we,
so
and my mom
go ahead.
and dad, and because his place was spared. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So my family, my mom, my parents lived with my uncle at that time in one bedroom place. So they were
Wow.
all, and they had their own kids. But after that, we managed, my dad's company gave us a shelter, so to call, but it was 9x3 trailer, metal trailer, nothing insulated, but that's all they could put together. And we put it by our apartment right on the street. And we lived there for 13 years without, like you mentioned, without gas, electricity, water.
You had to
And
scavenge for, you had to really scrounge up things to keep you warm, if I recall correctly.
yes, my brother had to go at that age, 5, 6 year old, he had to go into the buildings, collapsed buildings, and he would break down the wooden floors or the roofing or the tar or tires, anything we could find. And then my mom would cut them up and burn them in a rusty metal burner, wood burner that we were given. And the smoke, it couldn't even go out. So we were breathing it, all of it. We would go to school and outside with our nostrils black and just breathing all of that stuff. And you had
How
to
long?
stand there. My mom would stand and stir that stuff. Otherwise, it would stick to the bottom and never burn.
Wow. Um, how long was it before you had your next meal immediately after the aftershock?
You know, well, of course, when we moved to Yerevan to the family, we got something. It was
Right.
not as peachy and sweet as it sounds. It was like a Cinderella situation there. My mom would bring from Red Cross and American, everybody around the world started sending help. And my mom
Hmm.
would bring them every weekend. And it's like 3 hour drive each way. She would drop it off. And then this family, they would just devour it without sharing with us. They wouldn't let us. They said, this is for the caregivers, not for you.
Wow.
So we would go hungry and even clothing. We couldn't get clothes for us. They said, nope, it's for our kids, not you. So it was very, very difficult. But then, you have the money in the beginning, whatever we had, but there were no stores open. And then when the stores started getting something, there was no money. So it was very, very, very hard to get food. And we would stand in line all day. My mom would be like 24 hours in line to get one loaf of bread that smelled and tasted like mouse poison.
Wow.
And that's what they used.
Yeah, that's what I remember you saying is they used
Yeah.
some mouse poisoning in the flour, correct?
Yes.
In the grain?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was left in the warehouse. The mice had gone in and they had sprayed mouse poison to get rid of stuff. But then, because there was nothing else to eat, they just turned it into bread. They baked it. It's a loose term for bread, really. It was like chewing sand, coarse
I
sand.
I bet you appreciate your own cooking nowadays, having
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. What things did your mom do that helped you mentally be prepared for this crisis?
It's incredible because my mom, she did not show fear. When I think of it now, I look back and I think, how did she ever do that? Because my dad was not a creative type or figuring things out. He got along whatever we did, but my mom was the hero. She saved our lives. She was always optimistic. Oh, this will pass. Oh, it will be great. Yeah. And she always tried everything she could. She put together made something out of nothing. Even cake mixes or whatever happened to be there, she would turn into something special, even though on that stove is all we had. But she
Wow.
cooked and managed to keep us fed. And then a few years later, we would get power like 2 hours at night only. So she had to get up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whenever that was, and she would prepare something at that time so that when we got up in the morning, we would have something to eat. Or even heat up water so we could take a bath or clean ourselves.
So, what about waste disposal?
Yeah,
That's
she
an
she
aspect of
hero.
preparedness. Yeah, your mom does sound like a hero. Um, Talk to me about disposal because that's something that very rarely gets talked about in preparedness. How did you all handle waste disposal?
You know, there was a toilet in a restroom. It's so hard to call those names because they're just you can barely call them. But of course, there was no water to flush or anything. It was not hooked up like that. But she would do laundry by hand. Whenever she would get buckets of water or certain time of the night or day, there was water, she would get it, collect in buckets, and then do the laundry and save the water. So whoever needed to use it, they would just pour the bucket of water into the toilet, and
into the
that's what it
toilets.
was.
Okay.
Recycled.
Um, Yep, recycle, absolutely. So, share with people a little bit about the Armenian economy, how dependent they were on other nations.
Well, Armenia for years was under USSR, part of USSR Russian control. And then in 1991, shortly after the earthquake was in 1988. So in 91, they became independent. And then at that point, it was like us on our own. And the struggle was so real. We had to really depend on others helping us because economy was poor and pathetic. And the biggest problem of the earthquake destroying so many lives and buildings was because the buildings that were being built, they did not meet the criteria. People were stealing materials. So it was not built to the code. That's
Right,
why we lost so many lives, tens of
right.
thousands in a small town. So it was a very, very big struggle. I need to tell you one thing, might be helpful for people who have not seen hard times like that. When you walk on the streets, I remember watching guys running to women and pulling their earrings off their earlobes, tearing them
Hmm.
and stealing, right? Or their necklaces, gold or
Yeah,
anything. And they would trade it for a loaf of bread or food. So that
yeah.
is real. I just cannot tell people enough that it could happen.
That desperation is
That's not
real.
better. Desperation is real and it was everywhere.
So, what did your mom do? I know you've shared with me some of this, but you were saying that some people were so desperate that they resorted to prostitution, and they would pimp out their kids for food. And yet, your mom did such a great job in maintaining you with dignity and with modesty. Share with our
Thank you.
audience a little bit about that.
Thank you. Well, my mom is big about, yeah, she said I'm raising ladies. And she constantly, every day, she would talk about chastity and virtue and everything that you need to be, all the manners.
Hmm.
And she taught us everything. And she was really strict about modesty, I have to say. And she was sewing our clothes. So she would make our clothes for us.
So it's interesting that even, and we talk about the first and second principle of preparedness, the first principle being spiritual preparedness and the second
Mhm.
being mental preparedness. It's interesting to see how well adjusted your mom seemed to be both spiritually and mentally. What faith were you raised in?
It's called Armenian Apostolic. It's similar to Russian and Greek Orthodox.
Hmm.
Um, but the interesting thing is, Kelly, that under the USSR government, we were not allowed to study the Bible or go to church. But her parents lived and she was raised right in the backyard of the church, the main church in Gyumri, in my town. So she always heard the bells and she did not even know how to say a prayer, really, but she always believed in God and still does. And I remember as a child, before and after the earthquake, every time she went into the apartment or dark room, even in the house, she would say, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. She would whisper that. She said that's her prayer for protection.
Hmm.
So she always gave us hope that God is watching and will be taken care of. And it will be good. It will be okay. Everything will be okay. She still says the same. She still does that. It
How
will
old
be
is your mother
okay.
now?
She just turned 70 this June.
Oh, well, she's definitely a hero in my book. My goodness.
Thank you.
Let's fast forward the last 15 minutes that we've got. Let's fast forward and talk about your drive to make yourself mentally strong, and give yourself skills so that you could help benefit the family.
Well, when after the earthquake, we were struggling, and Americans came to help. There were so many missionaries, different faith people. I didn't even know who they were, but they were around. At that time, I was studying English at school, and I just fell in love with it. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to learn English and become a teacher and a translator down the road, which I achieved. And so I would just go and talk, and neighbors, family, and friends, they would just come to me and say, please, can you translate this and this? They would find somebody is working somewhere, helping, a volunteer, handing out some food, or they need some clothing for their kitchen, but they could not communicate. At that time, English was not popular in Armenia. And so I would just go with them, go and talk with my broken English. And I think it was making it work. And at that point, I decided, boy, I am doing some good. I can do this. So that was my drive, that I could help more if I stay with it and learn the language even better.
Yeah, communication is so important. It's the 10th principle of preparedness, and you were helping to facilitate that communication in time of need.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
13 years takes its toll. You know, for 13 years, you had to fight for every meal. You had to,
Yep.
every drop of water. You actually went on to have 3 jobs, or was it more?
At one point, I was going to the university and had 5 jobs.
Oh my goodness.
5 jobs. So I did not have much time to sleep. And
you didn't have any time to get in trouble.
No, seriously. But I was the only sole support of the family, the breadwinner. So my parents lost their jobs right after the earthquake. And so I had to do something. And my sister loved math, and there was not bringing any money. And my brother was buying and, reselling stuff. Like, it's funny. Kerosene is what he was selling as a little boy, because that's what we burned in the lamps for light, for power, not power, for electricity, to study. Between the candles and the kerosene lamps, and that's what he was selling to get little money.
Wow.
And so I had to jump in and help the way I could, and I was taking private English lessons, giving them, and ended up working as a teacher in a high school and radio and TV station, and from there, several other jobs that I'm grateful for.
Well, one in particular got you your husband, and thus your family that you've got now. Why don't you share with our listeners about that story?
Well, I met an American economist in Armenia who had lived there for 10 years. And it was in 2000s, early 2000, I met him in the studio. And being the English translator of the studio, I was the one welcoming him and talking and gave a tour and stuff. And then a couple of years later, he found me again, emailed me and said, I've got this gardening expert coming to Gyumri, Chirac region to do some gardening humanitarian project, and I would like you to be his translator. So, and that was my future husband, Jim. I worked for him a few times that year, and then in 2004, he invited me to come to America to translate the books and materials, the Light of Gardening course, into Armenian. So I came here, and then we got married, and the rest is the history.
That's wonderful. So,
And
how
that changed my
important?
life and my family's life.
Absolutely, it certainly did. Um, how how has the Mittleiter gardening method? How did that impact Armenia?
That was very, very important because it takes very small space to grow so much food with little water. That was a problem for us. And so we set up gardens all around all the villages. And we would just go supervise and had a greenhouse and everything. So he increased the yield so much more than the Armenians could do with little that we had. But more importantly for me also was that my mom, a city girl, got to learn gardening. At first, she was not too sure about it, not happy about it, but then now she's an expert and she
Yeah,
grows amazing
I
gardens.
have a picture of your mom holding a 20-pound cabbage.
Yes, yes.
It's
She grew
ginormous,
more.
and
She
yeah,
still does it, and she says that's her life. She can't go without a garden. She loves it. And having a
yeah.
healthy food, and she cooks, and she taught us to cook everything from scratch. That's what saved us, her cooking.
How has your preparedness, here we are, 2024. How has your preparedness been impacted and colored by what you went through as a girl?
Well, I hate to say obsession, but almost like that. I just can't think, what if something happens and I go without it? Because I have been there. I know what it is and how it feels. So, and preparedness, lots of people think, you just get this bag of flour, this bag of wheat or whatever, and then set it there. For me, it's different. I love preparing. I do, of course, my husband grows this amazing garden, lots of food, and I love preserving them, canning, and my new love is freeze drying them, which takes up less space, lightweight, no jars to break, and nutrition is higher. So I prepare meals that we love to eat and freeze dry, or fresh fruit and veggies from the garden. I just love it. And of course, you got to have all the other things like water to rehydrate, but also stay hydrated. That's very
Hmm.
important.
Hmm.
And ammunition. You got to be prepared, because I still remember, I can still see how people were just robbing others to get food. So I don't want
Yeah,
to be at that point.
yeah, you've certainly had a very informative growing up that has colored the way that you prepare. Um, does your mom still share wisdom with you today?
She does. She she does it, and she does the preparedness herself too. She doesn't go overboard. I don't want people to think that you have to hoard a bunch to be
Hmm.
prepared, but wisely. To me, that's what matters. And
Yeah, to be
she
prudent.
still does. We taught, yes, yeah, we definitely. I benefit from my mom's wisdom still, and lives
That's
40
wonderful.
miles north of me, so it's really great.
That is wonderful. So my last question for you, and I ask all my guests this question. If you could get something, one thought into the minds of preppers, if you could change their mind about one thing or give them a nugget of wisdom of one thing, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing is when people think it won't happen to me. It could. It could happen, and you never know when it happens. But it's very, very important not to panic. I still think of my mom as an example, how she never panicked, she never showed fear. So, to keep the family together and not fall apart, I think that's very key. But that comes from being prepared mentally, spiritually, and physically prepared. So if you're prepared, you shall not fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then just have a little bit of whatever your family loves, and know that you're in good place, and make friends with your neighbors and know who they are, who you can turn to if something bad happens. So I think that's what I would share. Do not panic and be prepared.
So, what about those neighbors above you who were doing the reconstruction? Did they survive as well?
Yes, they did survive. Um, our building, the first two entrances, we were in the second entrance, was the one that got damaged the most. The rest of the building stayed nicer, but we did not lose
So the
neighbors
reason I
there.
ask this is it's interesting in a crisis, your neighbors that may be a little bit annoying sometimes, they become your life raft, they become part of
Yeah,
your community. And I'm sure that happened in your scenario as well, is that crisis brought people together, and
yeah.
it brought the best out in people as well as the worst out in people.
That is so true. I remember as kids sitting on that bench waiting for the family to get together, and neighbors and people, just a man going into that ruined, destroyed building, and we are watching how they are pulling people out, or dead bodies. So they were trying to do everything they could to save lives. And we were just sitting there and watching another body, and it was just like cold shock.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, they got together to help each other. Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly grateful that there's a happy ending here for you, and
Thank you.
what you endured. And Armenia is a much better economy today than it was back then. Um,
Yeah.
the um, the preparedness of a nation is so vital as well, because Armenia wasn't self-sufficient. They were so desperate
No.
that they were stealing supplies from construction sites and building inferior buildings. Um, so I appreciate your value and your knowledge and your wisdom, and thank you so much for being willing to share it with us.
Thank you, Kelly, for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you
Thank
go.
you.
We're going to catch your husband, the brilliant man behind Mitlighter Gardening. We're going to catch him on the next one,
Yes.
and I'm so looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Araksya.
Thank you. Bye.